I now call Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I wish to thank the honourable member for Feltham and Heston for bringing this important debate forward. And this debate is very important because there are now serious concerns, as we've heard today, that too many people, some of our most vulnerable, are being left behind. Every one of us needs to have a viable way of paying for goods and services that meets our needs and our circumstances. And for some, that may be card payments. But we need to have access to cash for goods and services if that is the most appropriate way that we live our lives and suits our circumstances. Digital payments have become easier, but we also know from research that over 8 million adults would struggle to cope in a cashless society. And it's important to remember that many pay for goods and services with cash due to circumstances which means they don't have the option to pay in any other way. And the biggest factor in paying for goods and services in cash is where someone is on the income scale. The lower down the income scale a person is, the more likely they are to rely on cash transactions, regardless of their age. Importantly, around 9% of those who rely on cash transactions do so as a budgeting strategy. The fear that they may overspend if they don't use cash and therefore fall into debt. It helps them keep track of their spending, and there is no doubt that cash allows a degree of control that digital transactions don't offer for many people, as we heard from the honourable member for Strangford. Because with cash, you can hold it, you can count it, and when it's gone, it's gone. It's a real and physical aid to budgeting. Indeed, we need to remember that debt advice charities actively encourage people in debt to cut up their cards and deal only in cash for obvious reasons, which goes back to the points made in this debate about financial education. We've heard much about the decline of ATMs, but this is merely the tip of quite a significant iceberg. This is a symptom of a wider trend. The underlying issue is that some businesses prefer payments to be made digitally rather than by cash, and we heard today that Vodafone now no longer accepts cash payments at all. And the reason for this is because of the cost to businesses of handling and banking cash, and we've heard much about access to high street banks. In my own constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran, the banks are stampeding out of our towns with alarming and eye-watering speed. In the last 8 years, Scotland has lost 1/3 of its banks. And these closures continue apace, as we heard from the Honourable Member for East Lothian and the Honourable Member for Glasgow East. But driving consumers towards digital payments clearly excludes those consumers who do not want to or simply do not have the option to pay for goods digitally. So if we want businesses to continue to accept cash, it has to be made easier for them to do so, and easier for them to bank and deposit in a way that works for them. And we know that post offices have been offered as an alternative to banks, but we know that post offices are in crisis, with many postmasters finding their businesses increasingly unsustainable, often working for less than minimum wage, something I raised with the Treasury and Post Office Limited almost 2 years ago. For those who need to use cash, we must keep cash viable. It's important to remember that some 1.3 million people in the UK do not even have a bank account for a whole variety of reasons. And as for access to ATMs, we may consider this as a cause and a symptom of a society moving more closely to a cashless society, which should give us cause for real concern. I'm actually worried about time, so I'll just press on if you don't mind. Consumer organisation which found that cash points are disappearing at a rate of 488 per month between June and December last year, with over 250 free-to-use cash machines closing monthly, and 3,300 UK bank branches closing their doors since 2015. And it's worth noting that 1 in 5 cash machines in Scotland will impose charges by the end of this year. It's self-evident that charges for using ATMs hits those who are much less affluent much harder, since they are more likely to make regular and smaller withdrawals rather than occasional larger withdrawals. And paying to withdraw funds from cash machines is more. The pay-to-use cash machines are quite contrarily most often found in poorer areas. Yet another poverty premium punishing the well-off. Clearly, we need urgent regulatory action to protect consumers' right to use cash. Otherwise, and the Minister will know this, we will be excluding many of our constituents from buying goods and services that they wish to access. And that's why I fully support the Which campaign, Freedom to Pay Our Way, which is also supported by the Federation of Small Businesses. This calls for the Government to appoint a regulator with sole responsibility for cash infrastructure to ensure consumers and businesses can continue to access cash. It should not be an uphill struggle for people to access cash on which they rely, because that means that they are struggling to go about their daily business every day. And we know that the drift towards digital has not been without its problems because of IT glitches, including the high-profile problems last year suffered by TSB, which caused chaos for consumers. As the Honourable Member for Feltham and Heston reminded us, apart from IT glitches, those living in rural areas can find digital access extremely problematic with poor broadband reliability. Of the 5.3 million adults who never use the internet, 70% of them live in rural areas, 3.7 million people. So they don't rely on cards and digital payments, so we must not overlook the challenges of relying on digital payments for consumers and businesses in rural areas, as indicated by the Honourable Member for Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross. Therefore, it is essential that consumers' interests are front and centre in this debate. The customer must be king. The way we bank, the way we pay for goods and services must meet the needs of all customers. And banks and financial institutions must have a duty of care, a legal duty of care, for their customers. So I hope the Minister today will indicate the Government's willingness to appoint a regulator with sole responsibility for cash infrastructure to ensure consumers and businesses can continue accessing cash. I hope to hear what he will do to ensure a duty of care in all our communities to ensure they are not financially excluded and can access the goods and services that they need as they wish to access them. What is clear from this debate is that there is a financial exclusion crisis, and we are all keen, I am sure, to hear what measures the Government will take and what measures the Government is willing to take to address this matter.